D-Day was a massive event in World War II. Taking place on June 6, 1944, the Allied powers swept in and invaded Normandy, France, resulting in massive casualties from both sides. I asked myself the other day, wondering about this, I wonder what Halo's D-Day event was. I mean, after all, we're in a fictional universe where anything is possible. So what was it? What is the biggest battle in history? And after some research, I found that D-Day event in Halo lore and I was surprised on how huge it was. Holy freaking crap. So today we're going to talk about that battle, and spoiler, it is a lot bigger than the Allies' invasion in World War II. Today is going to be a good one, guys. Let's go ahead and get into it. The Human Covenant War was incredibly destructive and chaotic, spanning between thousands of stars and hundreds of colonies. The war overall resulted in over 23 billion civilian and military casualties. In other words, take today's population here on Earth in 2018 and have everyone die 3 times over. That's about how many people died in this war. Now, the Covenant also took huge hits, such as the city of High Charity devoured by the Flood and millions of aliens dying, almost resulting in even the extinction of the Sanchayom, the prophet species. Although technically this war was the biggest war in known history, at least recent history, this war spanned over 30 years. Actually, the D-Day of Halo, which if we're just talking about one specific isolated incident or battle, actually took place thousands of years ago, back in the days of the Foreigners. The battle was between the Flood and the Foreigners, and it was the most destructive and absurdly huge battle ever taken place in the galaxy that we know of, and it was called the Battle of MAGINOT Sphere. Interestingly enough, the word MAGINOT came from the French network of trenches and fortifications set between the French and German forces during World War I and II. So it seems that this battle was, in a way, inspired by D-Day by the writers, a massive battle that would determine everything in the future. Although it's not exactly clear where or what the MAGINOT Sphere actually was, but it was most likely an energy barrier that protected the world or worlds that the Foreigners hid away from the Flood. This battle was preceded by the Logic Plague successfully turning the infamous Foreigner in Cilia AI, Mendicant Bias, against his creators. After decades of him talking to the Graveminds, he had eventually become turned and convinced that the Foreigners were foolish for not letting the Flood consume them, as that would be the proper next evolutionary step for all life, believing that they were arrogant for not taking the next evolutionary step for all life, which would be evolving into the Flood. Mendicant, blind with anger, set an invasion on MAGINOT Sphere, the last line of defense that, if taken over, would leave the Foreigners defeated entirely. Mendicant Bias, the turned AI, with genuine allegiance to the Graveminds, ordered the Flood to discontinue growth and feeding and instead gather at the Magnet line to overwhelm the Foreigners' defense. Mendicant used literally every resource he could possibly grab to aid in this battle, even getting Foreigner superluminary ships that were once abandoned even by the Flood to come into this fight. The Flood gathered over 4.8 million vessels. However, most of them weren't even military ships, but there were a few capital warships in the mix, as he amassed about 1,000 Foreigner fighters that did in fact have weapons on them. Now, this battle would not be in the Foreigners' favor at this point because the forces were about 436 to 1 in the Flood's favor. The Foreigners waited on the line with about 11,000 warships, and only about 2 hours after the Flood fleet first appearing at the Magnet line, Mendicant Bias began the assault with about 25 of his vessels first sent in, amounting over 1.7 million small and leisure aircrafts to storm the Foreigner warships. Mendicant's plan was to not attack with weapons, but instead use the Flood to overwhelm them by massive amount of targets. Of course, this certainly makes sense for the Flood. The Flood are extremely flexible and versatile, and it would be possible for them to, even though they would send in helpless and weaponless Flood aircrafts, they could attach themselves to Foreigner fleet ships and take them over on the spot. So the battle ensued for about 3 hours until finally the first ship had got infected by the Flood. They had evaded them for that entire time until now. But the first infected ship slammed into another, and over 30,000 Flood forms jumped in and killed the Foreigner crew. For the next 4 hours, the Flood invasion got increasingly intense, in which finally the last of Mendicant's forces pushed in to the MAGINOT line, and it was basically hell in space. At this time, 343 Guilty Spark and the ISO Dynac prepared to fire the Halo Rings, knowing that the only way to kill the Flood once and for all was to wipe them out entirely by destroying all sentient life. Offensive Bias, who was in charge of defending MAGINOT line, had actually been delaying the Flood this entire time, knowing that everything would be gone soon anyway. As the Halo Rise fired, it instantly killed all Foreigner and Flood in its area of effect in mere seconds, and left thousands of ships lifeless and unpiloted by any crew. The Flood just moments before were overwhelming the Foreigners with millions of ships. Well, within seconds, the odds were rebalanced. Infected Foreigner ships began to self-destruct, and the massive amount of unmanned ships began crashing into each other, where about 50 of Mendicant's most powerful warships' fuel cells ruptured, destroying his best chance of winning in mere seconds. Now with the Flood gone, Offensive Bias outnumbered Mendicant ships 6-1. Aboard a surviving warship, Offensive Bias took Mendicant's personality construct and sent it to Installation 01, where it was later buried. However, unwittingly, Offensive Bias was not aware of one piece of Mendicant Bias that was left on the Dreadnought, where it was eventually discovered by the Saint-Chaume, and that would be later used as a power source for their world ship, the High Charity. Mendicant Bias and Cortana would later have a run-in as Master Chief escaped High Charity aboard the Ark. In Halo 3's terminals, there's actually some logs about the Battle of Maginot Sphere, and also Mendicant Bias, whom sends passive messages to Master Chief. Mendicant Bias, after thousands of years of basically being in tombs, finally came to the realization that his actions were misplaced, and now seeks atonement, forgiveness for his sins against his creators, the Foreigners, because he's a Foreigner in Cilia, right? So what's so interesting about this is that there's almost a reflection, almost exactly the same thing is happening with Cortana, who has turned against her creators, humanity, and has taken Foreigner constructs, the Guardians, to do her bidding. But Mendicant knows better now, and some have the theory that he is actually responsible for cutting the portal a little bit short so that Master Chief would be separated from the Arbiter, and he would later be sent to Requiem and begin the reclamation. And of course, I don't think he planned for Cortana to eventually end up taking the mantle, but nonetheless, his enormous involvement in Halo may come to fruition soon in Halo Infinite. If you want to learn more about Mendicant Bias, I have plenty of videos about that. Be sure to stay until the end of the video to click on one of the videos about Mendicant if you want to learn more. There is just so much lore involving the Foreigners. Way back in the day, with the Human Foreigner War, the Foreigner Flood War, there is just so much lore that could be expanded upon in an actual game. If 343 Industries ever does make a legit spin-off game, then I think going back to the Foreigner days, especially maybe even tapping upon, do I dare even say, actually having some gameplay involving this battle would be absolutely mind-blowing for Halo fans, especially a game that is centered around the creation of Halo and the conflict with the Foreigners and the Flood. I think that would really bring a lot of clarity to a lot of fans that don't invest themselves in the lore. And hey, it would be about Halo, right? It would really bring us back to the centerpiece of what made everything in the original trilogy in the Reclaimer saga the way it is. So the Battle of the Maginot Line was the equivalent to World War II's D-Day, just about. This battle involved millions of ships, two enormous empires colliding for the fate of the galaxy, and resulted in, ultimately, both of their dooms. So what do you guys think about all this? Could we see an epic space battle between the UNSC and X Covenant fighting against the Created? Let me know your personal theories, speculation, and wishes, stuff that might happen in Halo Infinite down in the comments below. I really want to hear it, maybe use it for a future video. Guys, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, become a Halo follower, and hit like if you ended up enjoying while you're at it, and I'll see you guys soon. This has been Ron here on HaloFollower. Thank you for your time. Later.